Okay. Well, thank you so much, Professor, for joining. It's a pleasure having you. I'd love to start off by maybe an introduction of where your career is taking you and kind of where your education within economics started.
Great. Um, I thank you for inviting me to speak about this. I was lucky that I grew up in an affluent suburb and got a great start and ended up going to Yale as an undergraduate. And I wasn't sure whether I go to law school or economics PhD programs when I was done. I did economics as a major. And so I took LSATs and GREs and then postponed having to commit until I went to London School of Economics for a year. And I fell in love with doing even more graduate level of economics and was able to get into MIT, which is the premier university. And I twice had to turn down Penn because of some flukes in the timing of my acceptances. But MIT is a terrific program. My general advice, if you are able to go to graduate school in economics, go to the best PhD program you can get into. And many people actually want to get a master's degree also just to give them a heads up over other BAs. So I went to MIT. I came out and I had to do the usual job search. It's a really nice structure of helping you find the best academic jobs. You will have other people who did not choose the academic track, but I really like that I went right into being a professor. And I had a choice between Columbia Business School and coming to Boston University. And I chose BU because I didn't particularly want to live in New York City, and I wanted to be able to build a life around a place that I wanted to eventually live in. So I came to BU in 1981, and I've now been there for 42 years, all consecutive. So I'm unusual in that most of my colleagues have moved around once or twice between different universities. There's only one other professor who's been at BU for as long as I have. So
Wow.
that's my background of how I ended up where I am now.
Amazing. Well, that is so awesome that you've been able to be at BU for so long, and it's obvious the impact you've made. Secondly, I just kind of wanted to ask what sparked you into the fields of economics, and was there an event in your life that ultimately led you to this career path?
Well, my father was an economist, and he was started out during World War II, getting his economics bachelor's degree, and then came back, and he was sponsored to get a graduate degree at Harvard through the VA. So it's a reminder of how big a role that is. So I think when people who have an economist as a parent tend to think like economists, so that always helped me. When I was very little, my parents and I was really good in sciences and math, and I was thinking of becoming a scientist. But for me, the transformational event was after my senior year in high school when I was a camp counselor at an inner city overnight camp for kids who had much less privilege than I did. And it was a mixture of African American and Latino and low income whites and with their families. So it was parents and children, mostly mothers with young children. And it was so meaningful to realize how fortunate I've been that when I went to Yale at the time, I wanted to not worry about science and technology problems. I thought the biggest problems facing the US were social and political and economic. And I guess I was drawn to economics because it's the most rigorous math oriented of the different social sciences. I took philosophy and history and sociology, but I really loved economics. So that's how I ended up doing it as an undergraduate and a graduate student. I've always loved it. I have some recommendations of what you can do in addition to economics, but it's a terrific background for all kinds of outcomes, whether you go into private sector or government or remain in academics.
Very fascinating. And I know you kind of touched on prior to economics, another career path you considered was being a lawyer. And I've kind of heard that they kind of economics is very related and almost correlated to being a lawyer in law school. So I think that's very interesting that you're saying like there's there's an interconnection between these three and
Right.
many other career paths. Also, as you've been at BU for a great amount of time, and it's obvious that you're passionate about BU, is there anything you noticed about their economics program specifically that stands out compared to other universities?
Well, when I first came to BU, we were a much weaker department, and I was one of many people that were hired, and we upgraded. Boston's a fabulous city. I think that's one of the most important things. We're a large university. I think we're currently the third or fourth largest private university. Most of the other really big ones are public universities like Michigan and University of California. Um, I think that BU has had a long history of having a lot of international students. So there's more of a focus on international topics, development economics, and institutions that aren't unique to the United States. And one of the flaws in the US, in my mind, is how often we just look around at things that we've tried, and we're not open to looking at what's working well in Europe or in China or in the rest of the world. And there's so many things that we could learn from studying those other settings. And BU does a good job at that. And I guess the last point is that it's a very congenial department. And so we get along well. People go to a lot of seminars for their colleagues, and there's a lot of co-authorship. So that's a really good thing to look for.
Very nice. And I really like that aspect of diversity and just kind of inclusion. And I really respect BU for that. And I think that's a great factor.
Mhm.
Another question I have for you are some characteristics in your students. What are some characteristics that you ultimately think can allow a student to kind of go over the curve and truly succeed in their career of economics?
Well, that's a great thing to be starting about. And I actually got prepared by getting two books that I recommend as serious economists. The old one is no longer new. It's called Guide for the Young Economist. And it's now 20 years old, but it still has lots of good advice of what you could think about. And the other one came out more recently, and it's called A Guide, Getting a PhD in Economics. And interestingly, it's ghost authored by Stuart Hillman, who is some kind of well-known top 10 Ivy League professor, but didn't want his name on the book. So he makes a lot of comments about different schools, and it's a good advice for people who are serious about especially going on to get graduate training in economics. My advice that I give to undergraduates is that be sure you are a well-rounded person. So if you were studying economics in Europe or in China or Korea or Japan, many times you would go to a university and you would take all of your courses just in economics. And maybe they'd let you take some math and computer science to supplement your economics, but they don't get the perspective of history or languages or science, and all of those things are excellent to get. And the American system excels at doing that well. But what I think makes a great economist as compared to a strong economist in the US is if they also take courses that complement their economics. And the ones I always say you should take are always take way more than the minimum amount of math. You can never have too much math if you want to be a top economist in the United States. Secondly, take some computer science courses. In this day and age, everybody is using computers for data analysis or writing or researching things from the web. You really want to be facile at manipulating and communicating through computer languages. So take a programming language and make sure you can do that. I'm a big fan of every economist should take at least one accounting course. I happened to take two at Yale. At the time, it was kind of frowned on. Why are you taking this very practical course? But you will learn things about principles of accounting, balance sheets, income statements, asset reports, and it will make you a better person in managing your own accounts and reading government and especially corporate financial reports to understand what they're doing. And the last one that I encourage people to do is to take some kind of business management course, because economists always model firms and private consumers making decisions, but knowing what some of the rules are for that can be really valuable. And my one other related topic is that look for some diversity in which types of economics you do. Many people fall in love with microeconomics. That's my area. But you will actually learn a lot by studying macroeconomics or economic history, or especially, I think you should study behavioral economics, and I'll return to that later, perhaps.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And kind of touching on those books you said, my final question is, as I am going into my senior year of high school, and if economics is what I want to pursue, what are some websites or, as you stated, books that you think would give me a good broad understanding and good start within the field?
That's a great question, and I have not thought about that one as much. But I think that one thing as a woman or as a minority, you might want to read the web page for the American Economic Association. Has an excellent organization called the Committee for the Status of Women in the Economics Profession, CSWEP. Committee for the Status of Women in the Economic Profession. And the reason it's actually valuable not only for women, but also for anybody to know what are some of the obstacles for inclusion and opportunity. Because unfortunately, our profession is similar to many of the other physical sciences like computer science or engineering or science, hard sciences, in that it doesn't have enough diversity of women and minorities. It has certain international groups, but not all of them well represented. And I think that the CSWEP does a great job at interviewing many different kinds of economists and showing you that you don't have to just want to be a professor to get a PhD. You would be happy working at say, a nonprofit organization, or working for the government, or working at a corporation, choosing your employer carefully. So that would be really valuable. I also happen to think reading some economic history, like that. No, don't just think that the way things are now are particularly useful. If you have time, I recommend you watch a couple of movies by especially Michael Moore. Michael Moore is a comedian, but he's also a very wise critique and studies what is going on in the rest of the world. And my favorite movie of all for economists is to recommend you watch the movie called Where Should We Invade Next? Came out about 5 years ago. And the reason that Where You Should Invade Next is a good movie is it's humorous, but he goes to 6 different European countries and pretends, what would we do if we could conquer them and take the best that they have to offer? And we only, fight wars in countries that are really unfortunate, like Afghanistan and Iraq and Vietnam. And we were there for various reasons. But this is a reminder that it would be fabulous if we could go to Italy and we could conquer or take back with us the feature that they have fabulous women's support for maternal care and child care. We have pathetic child care support, and that's not true. Or in France, one of my other favorites, did you know that public schools in France never serve lunches on paper or cardboard? They sit down for a meal with a plate, fork, and knife for a 3-course lunch every day at school, where they get a salad, a main course, and some kind of dessert. And they don't drink soda. They don't even serve soda. They serve water or milk. And so the kids in France are learning good eating habits, such as we done. And my last example from this movie is in Scandinavia. The prisons are more like condos, where this is like murderers and serious criminals. They are in a condo where they have to cook their own meal and learn life skills of looking after themselves. And they could even, in many cases, walk away or swim across the harbor to escape. But they don't want to, because they have a different attitude about prison as helping you restart your life rather than punishing you for mistakes you made. So go ahead and learn about how other systems work, and you'll realize the one I actually am reading for humor by him is called, let's see, what is it called? It is called, it's about corporations controlling the US economy. And it's an excellent book. Okay.
Very fascinating. I will for sure have to check those out. And that movie sounded so interesting. So, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and super insightful.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah.